Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for T&D today, we have the Dandy Donut Factory mug from the Dandy Donut Factory. Donuts served the old-fashioned way. I've never been here before. A couple of the party members in the game that I run for got me this from like a thrift store or something. I don't really know. And inside of it, we have the Country Peach Passion Herbal Tea from Celestial Seasonings. This is a good kind of like mid to late afternoon tea, which is exactly what it is right now. It's not too heavy, not too light. Feels sort of like good in that middle sort of category, which is exactly what I was looking for. But that's not what we're here to talk about. First things first, it's been a year of me doing this show. That feels weird. It feels so weird. I guess technically yesterday, from when this is being posted, is a year anniversary of the first episode of Good Morning Adventures that went live on YouTube. I am so happy with how it's gone, so happy with how everything has happened, and I love getting to do this show, so I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I continue to have a lot of fun with it. So stick around, because even though the third season here is ending this week, we will go ahead and we will keep it rolling for a little while longer, I guess. In that vein, I said I was going to do something for it. I still don't really know what it is. I want to give something away, I think, to a subscriber, one of my YouTube subscribers. I don't know what that is yet, but make sure you're subscribed to me on here so that you can be part of the giveaway. I'll figure out what it is, and I will do it for Friday, and then we will go from there. I'll pick a name or a profile or something like that, and I'll figure it out from there. But that is going to be what we do for this, I think. We're going to give something away. Unclear on what it is. We'll figure it out. Anyway. Getting into what we are actually talking about today, we are talking about something that I want to touch back on, actually, because it was one of the first ever videos that I posted before I started doing Good Morning Adventures and stuff like that, from way back when, before I had this crazy little idea that has turned into a year worth of show. It's talking about the way that I do DCs for skill checks. And you might be thinking that's a really dumb and boring video idea, but I promise you it's actually kind of worth talking about, because I do them a little differently than the way that the book says that you should be doing them. Not that I'm like throwing the book out entirely, but hang with me. Let's talk about it, shall we? So I assume that most people know what a DC is on a skill check. If you don't know, it is the difficulty class of said skill check. You roll a d20, you add the modifier that is called for, and then if they have met or beaten the number that the DC is, they succeed on that check, or they succeed in different tiers, whatever it is. However you run it for that is the way that works. So it's the number that you assign to something to make it hard or easy or whatever. In the DMG, it is that 5 is an easy task, 10 is an average task, 15 is hard, 20 is very hard, 25 is something like incredibly difficult, and 30 is practically impossible. I got the numbers right, but I think I got the labels wrong a little bit towards the end there. But that is the general like scale that you're working with. And so you might be asking yourself, well, that's a pretty set scale. How do you do anything weird and different with that? Well, let's talk about it. Let me tell you. So the thing that I do that is different than other DMs that I have found is I actually use the player's backstory to help inform the DC of a check. This was a super relevant topic when I made the original video, because I had literally just finished running a session where something had come up, and I will relay that story again here in a sec. But something had come up, players rolled for stuff, and then they got the same number, and one of them succeeded and the other one didn't. And they went, well, why is that? And so I got to actually sort of like lay out my process for this. So the way that I integrate player backstory is I make sure that, one, I'm very familiar with the players' backstories, the way that they actually like operate in their sphere, how their character is built, the things that their character is good at, the things that they know, the things that they don't know. And I make sure that, you know, we try and keep it relatively balanced around, so that the character, it's not one character is good at every single thing under the sun, because that's just boring. Or every character has the same backstory, because that's just boring. It's not boring, you can have fun with it, but like, it's not what I want at my tables. So I make sure I have that in my mind, and then I apply a modifier to the DC prior to the players even picking up any dice. So, in this particular instance, the DC for finding shelter, or some kind of cover, really is what it was, but it was cover for the night, so it's kind of sheltery. I had set in my mind at 17 in this specific place. Now, they were on an open plains. They were going off of the road by 100 feet or so, and they were looking for some kind of like ridge or like small basin that they might be looking for that they could hide in, sort of like lay low and keep themselves stashed away in. Now, the ranger and the blood hunter in the game both wanted to roll survival to see if they could find something, and they both got an 18. Now, by standard sort of rules, that would say that they both got it. They both succeeded. They both figured it out. However, in this case, the blood hunter did not succeed. And that is wholly because of this system that I have in place. So, to give you guys backstory on the characters themselves, this blood hunter grew up on an island, very mountainous island, surrounded by fantastical creatures, all kinds of things, but there were no real plains on this relatively small island surrounded by mountains. However, the ranger grew up in the capital city about 20 miles north of where they were. They were very familiar with the plains around them. They spent a lot of their time going out, traveling around, making camp in different places around the city as they were training and things like that. So I went ahead and I took that. I had my 17 DC, and I applied a +2 and a -2 respectively. The blood hunter got the +2 because her character was not familiar with the landscape. She hadn't tried to set up a camp here before. She didn't know the features to look for to find this specific thing. Eventually, she would have found it because she did beat the base DC, but it was harder to like immediately find. And the ranger, I applied the -2 to because he had found himself in this situation a lot. He spent a lot of time in this area, a lot of time around these plains trying to figure out different places to actually set up for the evening so that he would be protected from the elements, from random looky-loos, things like that. And so, in that moment, they got the same thing, and I said, Climber, you found this. And they both kind of went, huh, well, why is that? And so I got to explain that I use this system. Now, it's a sort of a graded system where people who are intimately familiar with something or wildly unfamiliar with something, they both had sort of a wandery kind of background, so it wasn't wildly unfamiliar territory, but it was pretty familiar territory to both of them. For me, it ranges from 1 to 3. So, wildly unfamiliar or wildly familiar is that 3. You know it inherently. You're very, very accustomed to it. It's something that you do all the time. You get that 3. If it is something you do sometimes, you don't do it as much anymore, or like you did it a lot when you were younger. He had just spent a couple of years in a forest training elsewhere. You get the 2. If you're sort of familiar with it, you're not like super in tune with maybe the way that it's going, but you have general experience regarding it, you get the +1. Neutral is just that. You don't have any specific experience for or against it, but it is something that you could feasibly do. The -1 is it's a little ways out of your comfort zone. You really aren't super positive what you're looking for, but it's not like a debilitating thing. You could probably transfer some skills over to it. The 2 is you're not super attuned to what's going on around you because you're not familiar with the set of circumstances that you find yourself in, and it is not something that is as easily portable in terms of skills. And 3 is you are way out of your depth. You have no idea really what you're doing, but it gives you that ability to still try with a higher DC. Now, you might be asking, why wouldn't I just set the DC higher for this? It's because at my table, oftentimes I have characters with proficiencies that overlap in that way. They had the exact same modifier. They had the exact same score, everything like that. So it was really just that DC fluctuation that determined the outcome of that specific roll. And at my table, that one in particular, there are 6 different characters, which means that there are a lot of different things that make it kind of difficult sometimes to give the characters real differentiation. So adding in that little extra layer there lets me, as the DM, make sure that certain characters shine and make sure that they really understand that these are the things that they're very good at, and these are the things that they can really take the helm on consistently and do well at when they are actually playing the game. It also, in my opinion, helps balance out a little bit the bard and rogue problem that so much of D&D runs into sometimes with things like reliable talent and just flat out expertise. your bard or rogue will have a plus 17 to something by the time they reach the end game if you go all the way up towards the upper levels. And that just sort of gets difficult and hard all around for anybody else to actually affect anything that is going on. And so it's really helpful if you can add these little bumps here and there to allow yourself to have that kind of fluctuation in the scope of the game. While a -3 to a DC and a +3 to another one might not seem too crazy, that 6 range there could actually be the difference between a normal average character without a plus 17 in something succeeding or tying with the bard or rogue or something like that, that it just might push them over the edge for that, which is really cool. And it's not something that always gets to happen when you've got somebody who is so good at talking that they can, I don't know, convince a ghost dragon to fly you over the keep of the dead and just drop them off there with no real ill effects. That happened in my game. Whoops. So you just kind of, it's a system that I developed in order to give it a little bit more flexibility in terms of the characters being actually functional parts of the world, as opposed to static sets of numbers and not really able to have as much impact on the world around them. So I am a big fan of this system. It is definitely a judgment call, as most DCs are when you set them, but it is something that you can really kind of use to help emphasize the characters that need to be emphasized in a particular moment, if it comes to that as well. Like if you are in a big fight and there's a DC for something, if there is a character that narratively would make most sense for them to be able to be the one to do this thing, you can apply that same sort of logic to it, and you can just sort of bump them up over the edge, just like tip it a little bit in their favor so that they are the ones that are actually able to facilitate and finish off whatever that thing is. Similarly, like I said, in little moments like that, you just kind of get those little things of like, oh, you're really good at this. That's awesome. In the same beat as the ranger being really good on the plains, he would be less good in the mountains because he hasn't spent really any time there, and this blood hunter had spent a lot of time in the mountains, her entire life, in fact. So had they been on the mountains, those modifiers would have been flipped, and that's just the way that it goes. And I really, really like it as just sort of like a little side system that I have. And I don't apply it to everything, because there are a lot of DCs in any given game of D&D, but it is a really nice thing to have when it's sort of a calmer moment like that and something could just kind of happen. When it's a higher intensity thing, you don't really want to be stacking the DC higher if you don't have to, and it's not going to kill some kind of narrative beat, just because a lot of times it's better to keep the flow moving forward for that. It's in those quieter, slower moments that it really helps characters shine, because it's those little things that you realize kind of like, oh, I can contribute to the group in this way that I wasn't totally aware that I was able to, because I wrote it so that I'm just a little bit better at this. So it's rewarding putting thought into the backstory. It's rewarding putting that kind of effort in on the front end and allowing yourself to develop those skills in writing before you ever even sit down at the table. And that's what I think is good about it, because in addition to helping characters shine, it really helps put an emphasis on those early game moments that you can really sort of like open up and expand on your character in ways that you just can't do when you've established and have been playing the game for 6 months, a year at that point. So it's really, really a great tool that I like to keep in my back pocket for smaller moments like that, to help build a conversation, to help build some kind of narrative around it. And it's important when you do it to not try and like show favoritism in a particular way. It's important to actually like stick to, okay, this logically makes the most sense for them to be better at this than you. They have more experience doing it. It will be easier for them to find it, even though you guys have the same modifiers. And so that is my system for adjusting DCs. You don't have to use it, obviously. It's not written anywhere in the books. It's just something that I really like to do. I really like to have that little bit of extra control, because it can build those stories a little bit deeper than maybe just a flat die roll would otherwise be able to do. But that is everything I have for you guys on that. So going on to the shows that we have today. And the rest of this week, we have, of course, Dimension 20, Knocked Prone, Venture Maidens, Trials and Trebuchets, and Roll Out. And then tomorrow, Thursday, we have Critical Role, Authors and Dragons, NADPOD, and LGBT D&D. Go check those guys out. Make sure that you let them know that I sent you. Again, those are the bigger ones, so might not actually matter, but hey, it could be fun. I hope that, you know, they notice at some point and they say something about it because it'll be fun for me. But yeah, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out the link in the episode description. And don't forget the 1-year giveaway thing that I will figure out. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel, and I will be pulling a name for it on Friday. So make sure you guys subscribe so that you can be a part of that. But with all that said, everybody, don't forget, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.